We can send those through the chat.
Hi, Ellie. I'm Ev.
Hi.
You may have already told us this, but I'm kind of going nuts. Are we going to get to have the PowerPoints? Will you send that to us?
I can send that to y'all, definitely. Mm-hmm.
Great, thanks.
Yeah. All right, 1 p.m. All right, welcome everyone. This is a sort of quick tutorial on presenting information online. Now, the idea here is that once you understand and know some of the tips, what you should and should not do, the more confident you will be when you present online. Now, presenting online can require a lot of different things. Just for today, we're going to talk about the environment, the online environment factors. We'll talk a little bit about technology. We'll go over some time issues, lighting, your background, and noise that could be in your environment, and then also framing as well. So before I jump into this, does anybody have any questions? Anybody? Anybody? No questions? Everybody good? Or maybe you don't have questions yet. Feel free to type any questions into the chat box at any time, or you're more than welcome to interrupt me and just, a wave of the hand, excuse me, I'd like to, ask a question. Let me admit some more people. All right, is my chat box or anything in the way? Can you guys still see the PowerPoint fine? Okay, good. All right, so first things first, what we're talking about here is computer mediated communication. I like to call it CMC, and this just refers to any kind of human communication via computers. And this can happen in real time. This can be a recorded message. This can happen over text. This can happen over images, audio, video, etc. Now, for this presentation, I'm going to be focusing on streaming. I'll be focusing on real-time communication, platforms such as Zoom, GoToMeeting, there's Google Meet, and the rest of the platforms that you can use. So when we meet in real time, even though we're in different spaces, and in this particular context, we're doing this because not only does it cut costs, in terms of interviews, but in this case, we're trying to stay healthy, right? So one of the things you want to definitely consider and think about is the nonverbal aspects of it, and I'll get into that a little bit as we go along. But essentially what I mean by that is your environment, your space, things that are not vocal, things that people are looking at, things that are aesthetic, things that are visual. One of the first things you have to consider if you're recording is, if you're recording, not in real time, but if you're just recording, you want to make sure that you have enough storage, whether it be your phone or whether it be your computer. A lot of us are using the cloud, which is great, but in some cases, I would say, maybe the sake of viruses and other things that can happen, we don't always like to put our information online. We want it to remain private. So if you're going to record, you want to make sure, number one, you have enough storage. The other thing you want to do is check your microphone. For example, what is my sound? Is my sound good for everyone? Is there an echo? Is there any issue anybody's having? No, everybody can hear fine. So you want to make sure that in terms of your microphone and just the tone of your voice, right? It's not too loud, it's not too soft, that, you know, that works in terms of technology. So you want to make sure that the physical requirements are being connected properly. If it's the phone, some of you guys are, some of you all are listening to this workshop through the phone, on your cell phone. You want to make sure that, you know, your laptop is charged, your phone is charged, that your internet connection is stable. I know that's a lot of issue. There's a lot of issues with my students just in terms of the connection, their internet connection. Sometimes we can't predict that. So you want to make sure, even if you have to, in some cases, go up to campus or go somewhere where you know you have a certain amount of confidence that the internet will be solid, that's where you want to go. So make sure, just in terms of your equipment, in terms of your connection, your internet connection, that you're fully charged, you're confident in the security of the internet, broadband, that everything is there. You want to verify all of your information. What I had to do before this workshop is I had to talk to several people just in terms of accessibility, making sure that everyone has access to not only my computer, but that, you know, if there was some issue just in terms of reading, you know, sometimes people don't have the best hearing, right? Maybe they're hearing impaired, maybe maybe their vision isn't as good. And so we want to make sure that all of this information is still accessible to them. So I literally have been working on this for 2 days, just making sure the connection and all of this would run smoothly. So you want to verify your address, the link, the Zoom, whatever you want to be able to do a test run. So I got a question here. Is there a way to check your sound for quality before you start the meeting? Yes. So what I did is I set up a Zoom, a testing Zoom meeting with someone, a colleague of mine. We tested it out not only yesterday, but we tested it out again today. So I set up kind of a faux meeting, or kind of just a test run, as if I'm doing it right now, and everything worked out smoothly. And I was able to actually see some minor issues that could have happened. For example, I wasn't able, one of the things that we have problems with too is running 2 systems at one time. I was trying to actually check to see if the quality of my sound and everything would work, while also trying to be on Google Meet. And my computer just couldn't handle that. So now I know. So maybe I could have done something maybe via my phone, maybe been on the phone with her and then checking it at the same time. So there's little things that you have to kind of go through with your equipment, with your technology, with your voice, in order to see what happens. The best thing I can tell you is that if something does happen, you can simply provide an apology and try to fix it as best as possible, but really try to catch some of those issues and mistakes early on, because it can be kind of annoying to those people who are listening in if I was having a bunch of technological issues for about 10, 15 minutes. Like, I just don't know that people can hang on, that our attention spans will last that long. But that's a great question, Dan. Does anybody else have any questions about technology? No? Okay. So the next thing that I think is important to talk about, we're going to get into the time zone. Sometimes it's not something we necessarily think about, but as it relates to, especially if you're going to be doing interviews, I suspect there'll be a lot of online positions coming up. And if you're, you have to pay attention to the time zone that we are in. So think about and consider and make sure it's conveyed early to all those involved what time zone you'll be in, and double check, what time it is in your zone versus others, and so on and so forth. I think another thing to think about too is your own time zone preference. So if you have control of when a meeting can happen, you want to think about what's the best time for you. Are you a morning person? Are you an afternoon person? Are you an evening person? You want to make sure that you're, considering your best, your needs and your sort of when you're at your best. And you want to be reasonable as well. We still want to stick to business hours. I would hate to have a meeting at, 8, 9 o'clock at night. I don't know that that's appropriate. So, consider those things, but you definitely, if you have some control and you can set the meeting, or you can set the time schedule or what have you, go ahead and set it at a reasonable time. Again, something that fits you. And in terms of your needs. I'm homeschooling right now, so anything after 9 I could probably do, between 9 and 3. But other than that, before that, I'm trying to get my daughter up and going and things like that. So any questions with time frame, time zone? Okay. Sometimes those things are pretty clear, but you just have to say them. You have to make sure that everybody is on the same page. All right. All right, before you hit record, you want to be prepared. And what do I mean by that? You're going to prepare your presentation or your meeting or your speaking engagement or what have you, the same way you would a live presentation or meeting. So if you have some talking points, you want to make sure that you address those. If you have specific questions that you want or you need answered, you want to make sure you have those prepared and ready. And you want to practice them. So if you're not, if you're, you want to make sure that you want to make sure that these questions, you want to say them out loud, right? You want to make sure they sound appropriate and they're appropriate for this particular context or this particular situation. You also want to take a couple deep breaths before you actually start your meeting. You want to remain poised. You want to come across as confident. And if that's going to happen, that means that you have to get all the jitters out. You have to get all of the sort of you have to get all of those sort of questionable sort of things that's going on in your mind. And we'll talk a little bit about anxiety in the next session, but you want to make sure that you're poised and you're coming across as confident. So that does require a certain amount of preparation. Again, having those list of talking points, having those list of questions ready, and then practice them, saying them out loud, whether you're practicing in front of a mirror, whether you're practicing with a friend, if you can call up a friend, if you can, again, do a practice Zoom, that works out really well. And maybe you can get some feedback on that as well. But before you hit record, you really want to make sure that you have your ducks in a row, that you are prepared, and that that any kind of hiccups or any kind of concerns can be addressed before you actually go live. Any questions about that? All right, next. All right, there's some lighting tips. And when I send you guys, those who request this PowerPoint, there's a great blog that I found, and this is more for, I would say, people who do a lot of photography, movies, things like that. And this is where I got a lot of this information. And there's more information on there. But even if you look at my lighting here and my background, you guys see it's pretty good lighting. You want to make sure that it's not too dark. You want to make sure it's not too bright. The best really is that soft light from behind the camera. And again, do that test run, see what it looks like. You want to make sure that people can see you easily and they can see you clearly. So the other thing I want to sort of want you to think about here is that if for whatever reason, sometimes these things can happen, like maybe a light bulb goes out, or, for some reason, the lighting gets sort of blocked for some reason. You can take a moment and fix it, right? So the thing about, again, presenting from our homes typically is that, a lot of these things are quite personal. And so there's nothing wrong with that. There's actually nothing wrong with that at all. And so I think that people understand the situation, they understand the context. So don't feel like if something's not perfect or something goes wrong, that that takes away your credibility for some reason. Okay, any questions on the lighting? No. So again, even if you can't get that perfect soft light from behind the camera, you just want to make sure that it's not underlighted or again, too bright or overly lighted, I guess. So, all right, background. You guys see my background. It's fairly boring. And I would actually probably prefer maybe having some kind of frame or something sort of to look at. But for the most part, you want to make sure that your background is clean. You want to make sure it's appropriate. And you want to really, most importantly, in my opinion, is avoid distracting items. And what do you guys think I mean by that? What are some distracting items that you've seen? Anybody been on a Zoom recently where we've seen distracting items?
Your cat playing on your desk.
Yes. Yes. Cats, animals, even children. I mean, I love my daughter, but, after a while, maybe 1 or 2 times, I would even say 3 times, it's not bad, but after that, it does become a distraction. I think even certain types of art, that may be your taste, right? But, that may not always be someone else's. And so you kind of have to think about that. What else?
Ellie,
Yeah.
I have trouble with the lighting in my room, and I've noticed the big light behind me. Is that distracting to others?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes, it is. If you could even just cut that lamp on, and is that a lamp behind you? Yeah, that one. Or no, you're right. My apologies. And then turn that light off at the top. Yeah. Actually, can you turn that lamp off behind you and see how the one just right on your camera looks? Yeah. I like that. I don't know why it muted. Hold on. There we go.
Thanks.
You're welcome. Let's see here. Color by sometimes things get in the frame. Camera seems to have a wide angle. Yes. So I have one of my colleagues, actually, Alice Myatt. The background can sometimes things can get in the frame that even we're surprised to see. We don't always think about it. And sometimes our angle's kind of wide. So again, in thinking about that frame, you want to make sure that, you know, you clear that out, and you try to, you try to minimize some of the things in that frame. There's another one here. How about those cool Canva backgrounds for Zoom? You know, I haven't tried those yet. Do you guys know what he's talking about? The background. So they have the really cool, you could be in like a forest or, you know, someplace famous, things like that. Let's see. This is Deirdre. Oh, hey. So, yes, I think it depends on who your audience is. So I think for students, that's perfectly okay if you want to do those backgrounds. I don't know if it's okay for, I think, a more serious meeting, or, you know, where you're talking about things that are maybe, you know, maybe just have a little more seriousness in terms of tone. So I really think you, in terms of the Canva backgrounds or the virtual backgrounds, I think that's something to think about. So I think, again, it depends on who you're talking to. I think the students find that fun and cool, but I don't know that everybody else will. That's a good question. Do you need a green screen to make that work? I don't think so. I think the software is built in, if I'm not mistaken. So I think it's just something that you have to download. So yeah, I mean, if you have a green screen, awesome. you know, that works. But for the most part, I think you can download them, and I think they're becoming quite popular, actually. So again, think about your audience. I'll be talking a lot about that in the next session. You really want to think about who you're talking to and how they'll interpret those screens. So any other questions with regard to background? Some great input there. Okay. The next thing we want to think about is noise. And so it's not that difficult, I think, if you're just participating, because you can mute your computer. That's not a problem. But if you're actually presenting, I think it's really important that you try to eliminate your ambient noise. And you see that here where I talk about, it can be birds, it can be, you know, dogs. I have dogs next door. I mean, sometimes you can control it. Most of the time you can't. You can sort of apologize, but for the most part, that's part of preparation. You want to make sure, again, I chose this time because I knew that my daughter would be taking a nap, right? So you know, that's part of my strategy, right? But I'm crossing my fingers she doesn't wake up. But you want to try to avoid and take precautions as much as you can. You're not going to be able to control it all. I think for the most part, your audience will understand, but I think you really, again, try to minimize it as much as possible, and prepare for the unexpected. So if I had to, leave for a moment, I would say, please give me one moment, I'll be right back, right? If there's noise or crying or what have you. If I have to go and close my windows, close my doors, I'm gonna probably do that. I'll probably do that beforehand, but again, I'm gonna try to minimize it as much as possible. Silence your phones. And I think, and this has happened a couple of times, sometimes people unmute themselves on accident, which is fine. And again, it's okay, maybe two or three times, but after that, it can become a nuisance. So you want to be cautious or be aware of that as well. Any questions about noise? All right, moving on, environment. All right, frame, we've talked about this a little bit already. when we talk about the frame, we're talking about, again, everything that's in the peer view of your audience. Like Alice pointed out, sometimes your screen can be a little bit wider. You want to make sure you change the angle a little bit. The one things that I see often, and I see a lot, is that angle where, you know, you're kind of looking up the nose at someone. So you're kind of like this, right? And how does that look for you all? Right? Like how do you sort of interpret that?
It's really difficult because Dell computers, the camera is down at the bottom.
Yes.
So I guess you have to restructure where you put it.
Right. And nobody can necessarily see if you use a shoebox, right? If you use some kind of block of some sort just to bring it up just a little bit. Not that you want to be here, right? Because this is too much as well. But you don't, you know, here is perfectly fine. I have mine a little lower, but it's not terrible. But you want to try to make it so that it's sort of eye level. For some of you doing presentations, or, you know, maybe you're interviewing or something like that, you want to make sure that you're standing. You want to make sure that people can at least your waist up. They can see your hand gestures. They can see your movement, things like that. So yeah, having it too high, you know, like this, or having it too low, like that, can be distracting. Okay, nobody wants to look up my nose. Okay, nobody wants to look too high either. So in terms of the frame, again, this comes with preparation, just making sure that you can, again, do a test run with one of your friends and say, hey, what do you see? How do you see it? Right? Am I eye level? Okay. Any questions with regard to frame? Again, this is gonna help keep the viewers focused, okay? All right, so I'm gonna end it there. I'm gonna open the floor to any just general questions. I'm not gonna dive too deep into kind of audience analysis and nonverbal behavior, and probably gonna talk a lot about organization as well. But just in terms of the environment, some of this stuff you guys knew already. Some of this stuff, again, just needed to be repeated because I think people forget. But in general, I'm going to open the floor to any questions. Again, not diving too deep, but I want to address specifically what you all want to talk about. I got everybody here. So again, this is just the first session. This is just the first of 4 sessions. In the next presentation, I'll be talking a lot about audience analysis. I think it's, especially when it comes to speaking online and building your confidence, I think one of the things is really having a strategy for who it is you're talking to. I think sometimes we forget that. We know what we want to say, but we don't really think about how people are going to interpret that information. And so I think it's important to have that, to be prepared with that sort of knowledge about the different types of audiences you can speak to, and how that affects your communication. So I think what I'll also be doing at the end of all of my presentations is talking about courses that you can take at the University of Mississippi. Fundamentals of public speaking. We also teach a business and professional course in communication, the art of the interview. We talk a lot about, this is actually a course, all these courses are actually fully online. Collaborative communication, and we also have a wonderful debate course as well. which we're actually transitioning over to online. So I have a question here. While presenting, if we stand, won't it be hard to point at the slides? That's a really good question. So in terms of your, I would even say your frame, there's a couple different things you can do. So even as, you know, Zoom allows me to talk to the camera and I have my PowerPoint here at the same time. And here's just my rule of thumb. I'd rather you stand and either put your PowerPoint on a really large screen, or if you have a projector, great. And you can put it on there, and you can remotely click on your next slide. If you don't have that type of equipment, I'd rather you either send the PowerPoint out to those people that you'll be speaking to, because your only other option will be to put it on your laptop, right? Or have an additional laptop where you put it on this kind of small screen. And to me, that doesn't really work out. That doesn't work. Does that make sense? Whoa, is everybody, can everybody see me? Okay. So I think in terms of having to present with a PowerPoint, I think, and this is just from teaching public speaking online, I have my students, if they can't show it on a large screen where I can step back and I have a projector, and I have a large screen where I can show my PowerPoint, then I just have them send me the PowerPoint. Because if I just had another laptop here, it's just too small of a screen. Does that help? Unless there are some other options or other things that I am not thinking about. I think that showing your PowerPoint at the same time, it should be on a large, be shown on a large screen. What about screen sharing and going between screens? And then, yes. So yes, if you can present and it's unlike a formal presentation, you want to share your information just like I previously did, then yes, that's definitely effective. You can show your PowerPoint, you can be in between, talk to your audience, that definitely works. I think the rule of thumb here is that at every transition, you want to show your face, because that basically indicates to your audience or to the people that you're talking to that you're moving to a next point. Okay, so for example, there's typically 5 parts in a speech. So maybe after you introduce the topic, you can go back to this frame, you can go back to yourself and talk, and as you transition, then you can go to the next talking point. Yeah. Yes, that's just what I did today. Yes, that's exactly right. Yes. So I think to explain how I went back and forth, I won't pretend like I'm the best at technology either. I've just had to, like everyone else, I've got this crash course on Zoom. This has just been a couple of weeks. But I think that when you go to Zoom, you click on share screen, and then it provides an option for your PowerPoint. And you click share, and it shares your PowerPoint. And then when you can stop it You can stop share, or you can click new share if you want to share something that's not PowerPoint. So, you know, share screen, it should, I think you have to pull up your PowerPoint first. And again, I won't pretend like I'm the most technologically savvy person, but if you click on your PowerPoint, you pull it up, you click share, it should automatically provide an option for your PowerPoint. And then you stop sharing and it goes back to you. Let's see, I got another question here. Why can't students share the PowerPoint and then present it? Isn't that what you did today? So a couple things. This is from Mary Roseman. So I think that it depends on what it is you're talking about. So I think if you're just speaking online and you're just doing kind of a workshop like I'm doing, fine. But if you're talking about a full formal presentation, which is what my objective is in a formal public speaking course, then I want my students to stand up, right? So my apologies, I think I misunderstood that question. What I'm doing now is much different than standing up and actually presenting a presentation. I'm asking questions in between, I'm stopping, I'm going. If it's a formal presentation, you're speaking without interruption. So whether it's a short 3-minute informative sort of presentation, or if it's a kind of a 7 long, I'm going to ask you to stand up. I'm going to ask you to, I want to be able to see your hands. I want to be able to see your feet, your waist, right? I may not be able to see your feet and all that stuff, but it's a formal presentation. So standing is very, very important. If they have access to equipment, great, to show a presentation, awesome, but it's not something I really enforce. I think it's important, given that it's really what people expect when you go to present. They usually expect you to have a PowerPoint. It's not always like, you know, some of the TED Talks or like where people just come in and speak. Maybe the shorter presentations, yes, but for the formal presentations, I would rather, if they don't have the equipment, just send me your PowerPoint. I'll grade it as is, and then you can just simply stand up and present it. If they want to use their PowerPoint on the side and kind of show it, fine. But I don't think it's necessary that it's useful to those who are actually watching. Does that help? So again, going back and forth in terms of your presentation and talking and trying to remain engaged, you want to do so during transitions. Okay, it's a good question. All right. Well, that is all for today. I want to thank you all for listening to the Speaking with Confidence online. We talked a lot about the environment, and next week we'll be talking a lot about audience analysis. I think it's one of the first things after, of course, the environment and technology that you should be thinking about to speak online. Thank you very much. I'll see you soon.